All righty. Sounds good. So our project title, human to machine network communication. So what is that? Let me see. So when looking this information up, we found out it actually has a specific name. It's human to machine symbiosis. And basically what we're trying to understand is the direct human to device communication, kind of how in class we've been studying the different layers, like biologically, how can we connect a biological entity with a machine itself? Because especially considering you can make a lot of comparisons between machines and humans. So I wrote a couple of examples here, like we both have heating and cooling. I thought it'd be funny to add that we have an antivirus because we do have a defense system in our bodies, and then our computers also have a way of protecting itself. And we both have a way of communicating with different parts. From here, I'm going to pass it on to Cody.
Hi guys, so I figured I would just take a minute to talk about like the various applications that we currently have before talking about what could be possible. So we already have pacemakers that essentially just shock people in the right frequency at the right pattern to correct heart problems. And obviously the applications can extend out to helping people with various disabilities. One of our professors here, Professor Yang, his research actually involves effectively probing someone's brain, someone with Parkinson's, and what that does is it actually stabilizes their movements. So part of my interest was just in figuring out how that would work, like data, as far as like, is it a binary signal that's being sent? Do people even have internal voltages? So that's some of the things that our project looks to answer. Some of the issues with that, obviously, as I just said, how do you even tie in prosthetics into nerve endings? How do you take something like a Neuralink and hook it into someone's brain? So just trying to connect the dots between those two things, it's pretty challenging. Another thing to consider is not so much related to this class, but like, how do you even power these prosthetics? And that can also tie in directly to whether people have internal voltages or not. And for the next one, we're going to pass it off to Ryan.
So the objective of our research in reviewing these documents here is that we want to understand the electronic and physiological barriers that would prevent full integration. And we're hoping through understanding that forward process, we can also understand the reverse process of why even full integration or even partial integration is even possible. And researching through current literature reviews of current technology, we can figure out the improvements over time that have already been made and where we can go from this even further. So next I'll pass back to Cody.
So my area of interest in particular was restoring vision, lost vision, or improving lost vision with neural implants. And I've so far found out that it actually isn't a new idea. Historically, there was a case in the 1930s where someone was wounded with a gunshot and lost vision completely. However, doctors at the time were able to stimulate the nerves in the eye in order to create effectively light patches such that they could sort of see shadows. It wasn't great. Obviously, there wasn't any image processing that could happen because it was the 1930s, but I just thought that that was really interesting. Currently, there are a few products that have made it to market. The Argus 1 and 2 systems were, as shown in my figure, neural implants that have gone through various stages. So what happens is they take a chip, they insert it into someone's eye. A frame is actually placed around the eye such that they can get wiring and stuff in there, but an electrode is attached to the optics nerve, and it just takes captured images from a camera that has to be worn around glasses, transmits it directly to the chip, and they can use it to take someone who was completely blind before and give them some functional vision. And I don't understand really how it works. It seems like magic to me, but I intend to find that out. So I'm going to pass it off to Ryan for hearing.
So both the vision and this product here is the cochlear implant are examples of neuroprosthetics. This cochlear implant differs from a hearing aid, as a hearing aid helps people with like minor even to severe hearing loss of taking sound through this microphone here and amplifying noise back into already a working ear. But this right here, cochlear implant, is for people that have issues even down the whole ear canal of profound deafness. So with this product here, it takes in noise stimulus through the microphone, which passes it up through or processes the noise and sound in this speech processor up to the transmitter into an implant that's like placed on like the outside of the skull in between the skin. And this connects this wire to these electrodes that stimulates the cochlea, which is directly connected to the auditory nerve. And these right here are examples of neuroprosthetics because they link directly up to nerves and basically don't act necessarily as computers on their own, but different from prosthetics as in just like are attachments of limbs. They actually hook up to the body, which furthers into our next review here.
Hey guys, so I'm doing everything from the neck down, basically understanding the communication between our body and a prosthetic. In this case, I used an arm as an example. It seems like the most common use is a myoelectric prosthesis because the way it works is it actually uses muscle contractions. And then as you can see here in the image, the muscle contractions connect to a microprocessor controller, and then it allows the arm for movement. Which, fun fact, myo is actually Greek for muscle. So it's literally translates to muscle electric prosthesis. The thing though is that it doesn't really have a direct nerve connection. And what's interesting is then later on over here, the first time it was actually witnessed was in 2005, where there was more of where there was a neurotransmission. And one of the great things about this is that you can start to have sensations such as touch. So as before, where the muscle contractions were actually sending signal to the prosthetic, there was no signal coming back. So what's happening here with the newer neurosensors is that now there's signal that can be sent back. And in the newer ones, you actually have it to where you can get feeling. So you can have a prosthetic arm that can feel things. And in the image here, you can tell kind of there's a comparison between how a physical biological arm works and then how the electronic arm does essentially close to the same thing. And it basically allows it to feel different textures. Like here, for example, it was fabric. As far as our schedule goes, these are just the weeks of the year. I know it says 28, it's probably a little confusing for some, but it's basically the weeks of the year. So at week 28, we're going to collect more information. Then we'll begin our rough draft, work on our presentations. All three of us actually work. So we just gotta coordinate that as we go along, and then have our presentations ready by August 4th, and then submit our final bit by the 5th, the actual project itself. And then as mentioned before, Cody's working on visual integration. I'm working on body integration, and Ryan's working on hearing. And basically, we're going to try and understand when it comes to signal sent between the body and technology, we're going to try to understand it in terms of what we learned in class. So in the bottom here, does the brain have an application layer, a transport layer, network layer? Like, how are we able to perceive these things? And like, how does the brain understand signal being sent back to it? So that's basically what we're going to do. We're going to try and understand the latest prosthetic technologies, and then basically try to make as we mentioned in the beginning, there's physical comparisons that we can make between machines and people, but we want to know, as far as communication goes, what are those comparisons? And that's it. Do you guys have any questions?
Perfect. You guys did a great job. You were at 10 minutes, so we have 5 minutes for question. I'll kick it off. With the vision portion of the PowerPoint. It just brought to my curiosity, is there anything being seen as far as like regulations for driver's license?
So the idea of visual correction using prosthetics isn't entirely new, but it's also not going super well right now. One of the two companies that have brought products to the final stages for the market went under fairly recently. There hasn't been enough products in place, I don't think, in order to really necessitate these things, but there have been a number of clinical trials, and that's obviously a regulated thing, and that's been going on for roughly 20 to 30 years.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
Does anyone else have any questions for the team?
Question about the hearing aid one, the hearing restoration. Was there anything that showed like the possible range of like frequency response? Because I'm guessing that that implant would be pretty limited to what it could possibly like, you know, put out to as like actual hearing, you know?
Yeah, so the first ever model of it came out back in the 1950s, and it was only a single channel processor. And now in recent times, it can be up to, I think, 20 different channels, which allows hearing frequencies between about 400 and 4,000 hertz, which is just about like a little above like human speech.
Yeah, that's like all mids, basically.
Yeah. So I think the average human can hear between 50 hertz and up to like 20,000. So
I think it's like just under 17.
under 17
around for like, you know, older people. I think like, you know, teenagers,
definitely
19, 20. Yeah.
Window gets closer and closer as we get older.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's about like 400 to 4,000. So it's not perfect. And it definitely, that's kind of where most improvements have come over time, is expanding that frequency and expanding. I don't have like any audio examples of that right now, perhaps for the final project. I can include like sound bits from the 50s model to like the multi-channel we have now. But that's basically where like the typical trend has been, just expanding that window and expanding the amount of channels that the implant can receive and transmit.
All right, cool. Thank you.
When it comes to the neural implant for the loss of vision, out of curiosity, do we know what kind of resolution a person would get off of something like that? Like, is it 4K resolution, or is it just like a basic idea of like shapes?
So currently, it's not great. It's one of the things that I'm looking forward to climbing into. So right now, effectively, it's able to take someone who can see nearly literally nothing and effectively give them like a shadow visual sense. So you can see general outlines of things. Everything's still pretty blurry, but it enables you to stop bumping into things. So massive quality of life improvement for people who have gone completely blind. You don't have to tap around with a cane or anything else like that anymore with these prosthetics that are being developed. But it's still a little bit difficult to say, since it's kind of hard to tie in directly image processing with computing power as it is to trying to tie in the signals directly into someone's optical nerves and figuring out a way to make the brain understand. So it's still in progress, but no 4K.
Really cool project idea though, guys. This is awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I agree. We may have time for one more question. If there's no more questions, the next group up is Team Smart Grid.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, so for Team Smart Grid, I need to share my screen. Bear with me, everybody, sorry. Let's see. Share this screen. And all right, I think everybody can see the PowerPoint now, right? Just want to make sure.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, excellent. In that case, let's go ahead and kick this off. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edwin Rivera. And along with my team members, Adriano Bassani and Ecclesia Sanat, we'll be presenting our project proposal that covers just one of the many challenges that must be overcome when considering an upgrade of our existing infrastructure from the electrical grid to the smart grid. That challenge we're going to discuss is network security. Now, my own personal motivation behind this project was just to learn more about the importance of network security in a smart grid system. Some of the questions that came to my mind were, how vulnerable are our existing systems to a cyber attack? What are the different methods to watch out for? And what are the possible consequences of a large-scale cyber attack? Now, the smart grid presents an amazing opportunity to usher in a new era of reliability, availability, and efficiency due to its digital technology that allows for two-way communication between the utility and its consumer. Some of the benefits that are derived from this technology include more efficient transmission of electricity, quicker restoration of electricity after a power disturbance has occurred, a reduction in peak demand, which, by the way, also helps lower electricity rates, which we all love, and of course, improve security. Now, in the traditional electrical grid, an electricity disruption such as a blackout can have a domino effect that creates a series of failures. Smart grid technology will detect and isolate any outages and contain them before they can become large-scale blackouts, all while ensuring that electricity is routed to emergency services first, such as hospitals. One of the primary concerns regarding the network security of a smart grid is phishing, as it could be the first step of putting customers and organizations at risk. It is essentially just a type of social engineering where an attacker sends a fraudulent message, such as an email, that is designed to trick a person into revealing sensitive information or just to simply deploy malware. Now, the spreading of malware, of course, is also a great concern, since this kind of malicious software can inject any program or file that is intentionally harmful to a computer, network, or server. Now, this disruption to the system can do multiple things, such as leaking private information, allow an unauthorized user access to the system, or even deprive authorized users of their own access. A distributed denial of service attack is carried out with networks of internet-connected machines like computers, smartphones, what have you, that are already infected with malware. Now, this network of bots, as they are known, sends requests to the target's IP address, potentially causing the server or network to become overwhelmed, resulting in a denial of service to normal traffic. Now, since each bot is a legitimate internet device, separating that attack traffic from normal traffic can be quite difficult. Eavesdropping and traffic analysis is also a concern, since an attacker can gain sensitive information by monitoring network traffic, thus posing the biggest risk of data getting stolen. So as the need for a modernized electrical grid continues to grow due to our ever-evolving technology, so too does the significance of the issues that must be faced. Recent statistical surveys have shown that the prevalence of cyber attacks in today's world, such as 37% of cyber attacks towards businesses derive from phishing, and about 90% of successful attacks themselves are also from phishing. Companies are currently targeted by ransomware attacks every 14 seconds, which is absolutely insane. And distributed denial of service attacks have actually increased by 39% between the years of 2021 and 2022. Additionally, an estimated 95 user logins are stolen every second. Now, I believe that these statistics can only continue to grow as more smart grids are introduced into our infrastructure, since it represents a new source of data for attackers to take advantage of. Now, our team's primary objectives are to review the existing solutions that are currently being implemented in the industry and to resolve the previous concerns outlined. These include network intrusion prevention systems, intrusion detection systems, encryption, authentication, and virtual private networks. I'll now pass it on to Adriano.
So, oh, what happened there?
I think the data got erased. Oh, brother, all of it got erased.
I was at the wrong one.
That's so unprofessional, guys. I'm so sorry. Give me a second. And now I'm ruining your time, Adriano.
No,
I'm so sorry, brother. Bear with me.
It's okay. We have
Here, I can
another
send you
slide
the-
deck. Or Adriana, if you want to take over screen sharing, if you have it open.
Yeah, I should be able to do that. Hold on.
Yeah, don't worry, Edwin.
I broke my heart because I feel like I was in the group too. I do have another one here. Primary concern, significance. Okay, here we go. It's not good though, is it? Is it too small?
You just zoom in.
Oh, brother. Okay, there we go.
Okay, yeah, that works. Okay, so let me.
It's okay, Edwin.
Yeah.
All right.
So I'm going to start by talking about some known power system attacks. These are things that have already happened and are recorded, and they give us a pretty good understanding of how these attacks can take place or can take root in the first place. So the first one we're going to talk about is Black Energy. And Black Energy was a Trojan horse malware that was deployed on Christmas Day of 2015 in the Ukrainian city of Ivano-Frankivsk. And it was propagated as spear phishing attack, which was a directed attack towards someone in the network, in the power network, and it was successful. And it took root by dealing denial of service attacks to everyone within the system. It overwhelmed the system, destabilizing it entirely. It affected more than 1.4 million people, and it put more than 80,000 people at risk of total power loss, including the hospitals and other sensitive, what's it called? Infrastructures. The next attack that we can go over is Stuxnet, which was another malware incident. And this one is a little scarier because it is a known instance of the digital world affecting the real world. And it does this it was a computer worm that attacked the SCADA system, the supervisory control and data acquisition. It's a point of entry for the worm, basically. And it took control of the programmable logic controllers within the system. And it entirely destabilized Iran's nuclear power plants in the late 2000s. And it basically made the core spin out and entirely crippled their nuclear power plants and put a severe restriction on their development of nuclear power plants. So the next thing we can talk about is some ways to prevent these things. And that is, the first one is the IPS and IDS. IPS is network intrusion prevention systems, and IDS is network intrusion detection systems. These systems monitor for detected threats or well-known threats like the ones that I just talked about. It has a log of certain attacks that are well-known and certain substructures of how these attacks are played out. And the IDS system just monitors and alerts you to the possibility of there being a threat within the system. And the IPS is the one that takes preventative measures against these attacks. They're the ones that are actually going to do something about if there is malware within the system. And the best way to compare it is basically our immune system. It works best against the things that we know and the certain substructures that are similar, but anything that is wildly different, it won't be able to do a whole lot about. But this will protect you against most things, as it's a lot cheaper to implement attacks that have already been developed rather than developing your own system for an attack. So the next thing is encryption. And encryption is something I hope everyone knows what that is. It's a way to scramble data with certain ciphers that lets us protect the information itself. There's new encryption standards up to 256-bit ciphers, which are nearly uncrackable for the most part, unless you have the cipher itself. And that's kind of the issue with encryption, is as soon as you have that cipher or you're already within the system, there's nothing keeping you out of it. And it's really good to keep people out of the system, but once they're in, it's not doing a whole lot for you. So I'm going to pass it off to Ecclesias to talk about some other solutions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ecclesias. I am going to talk about some of the addition VPNs, which VPN is a virtual private networks. Pretty much, obviously, in order to as we know, like today's electric power grid has become a complex network comprising, both power and communication. The smart grid cyber infrastructure consists of, like many electronic information and communication system and service, along with information that contain, in the system. So this include both, hardware and software. So the basic function to process, and to store communication information. This is done by using control system SCADA. SCADA is one of the system nowadays that use on the distribution system. So SCADA is used for monitoring and controlling process data. It's similar to a personal computer that we use at home, which make them susceptible to attack and different threat because it's connected to the internet. So one way we can prevent the attack is to use security layer to have more secure security layer. What the security layer does is it's provide confidential, integrity, authentication, and availability. We also need to have a communication layer, which is to allow two-way communication. It's basically a layer which is necessary to allow transmitting information from a customer to a utility service. It is necessary to address. We also need to have security layer, which is necessary to address data privacy issue. We also need to have DRS, which is denial of service. So if someone trying to attack to get to a system, that can prevent them to do that. We also need to have firmware updates. As we know, what the firmware update does, it's allow utility to upgrade firmware and change programs configuration on the device to incorporate new functionality and firmware update, and to fix bugs or to increase features on background programs that run device. Utility usually perform firmware upgrades to accommodate, like changing application requirement to strengthen device security. Next slide.
Sorry for interruption, just a 2-minute warning.
Okay, thank you.
2 minutes.
Yeah, in smart grid protection, we need to apply some real authentication approach. Such approach could be, in a way to protect customers' information, private information. So such approach could be cryptography, symmetric key, encryption using hash function to distribute keys. We also need to use like strong password. We also need to improve the smart metering. This basically the one of the main component of smart power grid is it's the smart meters. However, it's not maintain security and communication. Smart meter authentication alone is not, it's not enough. It must, it must be ensure that the utility company is not forgery. So therefore, it needs to use a two-way authentication between the smart meter on the home side and the electricity company server. Next slide. Obviously, a concluding remark is that a research is focused on understanding the smart grid user system behavior and the risk of cyber attack, and developing a controlled communication strategy for achieving the smart grid vision of a more efficient and dynamic electrical grids. This is our schedule, pretty much. That's gonna go for this paper. Obviously, this is our focus. Yeah, next slide. And then this is the reference that we use for this information. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for presenting today. I'll open it up for questions.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Louis.
I saw that you guys mentioned a lot of solutions regarding prevention. It's completely fine, but have you guys researched anything related to the once the attacker is inside the network? I was just curious what you guys
I
found
think-
regarding that.
I think that's just where the IDS really comes into play. So it lets people know that someone has already entered into the system, but in terms of more safe measures afterwards, you're right, we would need to find more research into that. As it is right now, we just have the IDS, so we're trying to dig deeper into that.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause right now, the IDS and the IPS are just detection and prevention. I think the IPS also has some measures for once they're already in the system, but I believe that is more so up to, I think that's more so to the discretion of the workers as to like what strategies they would implement to try to, you know, uproot these attacks or like these malwares and worms and stuff. I think that's something we're definitely gonna have to look into then, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions for Team Smart Grids? Okay, up next is Team Virtual Sword and Shield. That is I, that is we, Harrison, Luigi.
Yep. Okay.
Let's go.
I'll be the one who presents. So let me figure that out.
Do
real
I need
quick.
to stop sharing first so that you can do it, or? will
I
it
I think we
think
still
can
go?
just,
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, I think that Zoom likes to pick whoever started presenting first. So let's see if this will work. Okay, does everyone see this?
yep, I can see it.
Oh, well, what the?
So you just go
I
to
clicked the wrong
slide.
way.
No, you go to the upper left-hand corner. Or
Where?
is it the settings? Yep, that one right there. Is there a drop-down menu on the settings? And switch.
Presenter view and slide view. No.
Yep, that was it.
Oh,
You
was
just had
it?
to switch. Yeah, you have multiple
Oh,
screens up, right?
shoot.
Just
Yeah, I
switch
do.
your screen. There you go.
There you
Oh,
go.
well, I still need to see my other screen. Oh, well, okay. So we're going to be presenting on defending against DDoS, distributed denial service attacks against smart grid infrastructure. And in our group is me, Harrison, Luigi, and Jasmine. So our proposal points, which are sort of what we're going to be covering in our literature review, is what is a DDoS attack, what is the smart grid, and we're going to be covering the risks of a DDoS attack against the smart grid and what potential solutions there are to help mitigate damage and combat them from happening in the first place. So a DDoS attack is a type of attack where a attacker will create a piece of malware that is able to infect other computers, and once he's in, and get remote access to them. And these infected computers are called bots. And once he has infected enough computers, he forms something called a botnet. And then using the botnet, he can he can make those computers all target a victim, and the connection to the victim will overwhelm them and knock them off the internet by basically filling up their router with so many packets that any legitimate packets going to the router get dropped. And so there's a few different types of ways DDoS attacks can be done. So one is called a reflection attack, and what a reflection attack is the attacker will spoof the sender IP inside their IP packet to the victim's IP address, and then they'll send a request to a third-party site, and it'll be a large request to get a lot of information back from the third-party site. So once the third-party site processes this request, it'll start sending the huge amount of information that was requested to this back to the sender IP, which, since it was spoofed, will be the victim. And so the victim will start getting this huge inflow of packets and data, and that will prevent the victim from being able to receive more stuff. And the advantage of this type of attack is that it's extremely hard to pinpoint where the attacker is, because the nature of how internet protocols work is that if you spoof the sender IP address, you have no idea where the actual original sender was. So, because if you just examine any of the packets from the DDoS attack, it's going to say, oh, the victim is the attacker, which is a very good way to camouflage the attack. Now, there's other types of attacks. So there is a type of what we call a flood attack. There's two types of flood attacks. So one abuses the TCP protocol, where in the three-way handshake, the attacker will have the bots send a synchronization request to the victim. And then when the victim sends a synchronization request back to the bots won't send an acknowledge to complete the three-way handshake. And so what this will do is that the victim, their network will wait for the acknowledge to happen. And eventually, once the acknowledge is never reached, all these piling up sync requests will eventually cause packets to be dropped in the router, making it so that the victim can no longer send it outgoing information because their router's full, because anything they try to transmit will just be dropped instead. And then the other type of flood attack is called a UDP attack, and that takes advantage of the UDP protocol, where the attacker will just have the bots send lots of information directly, and this will cause the victim in various random ports in the victim's connection. And so maybe not all these ports will be open because the attacker doesn't know that, but it will flood all the ones that are open. And they'll, similarly to the original reflection attack, it will just fill up the router for going information and prevent any new information from arriving. And this is the most common type of DDoS attack. Like if just some person wanted to DDoS a random guy, then they want to install DDoSing software, this is usually what it will be built on. It's the easiest one to execute. Okay.
So my name is Jasmine Roman. So what is a smart grid? First, we have to understand what the grid is. So the grid is a chain of interconnected transmission and distribution lines that run across North America. And it delivers the power from gas turbines, steam turbines, hydro plants, solar power, nuclear plants, wind turbines. You guys get the gist, right? Anything that we're turning into electricity that needs to be distributed out to our networks and out of our outlets, lights, and now even electric charging vehicle stations. So what makes the smart grid? Well, in 2007, Congress called for the smart grid Congress called for a smart grid for us to start spending money on new infrastructure. So even though we've been spending about billions of dollars so far, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave the power grid a C- recently in 2021, stating that most of the nation's components are close to over 100 years old, which is double the life expectancy. So the smart grid is an infrastructure of upgrade of sensors throughout various checkpoints with computer monitoring systems, also known as meters, that control the current flow through different points of the grid. The computers are able to make automatic adjustments to the current flow to maximize the efficiency of the power distribution, which allows for smaller adjustments in real time, which prevents bigger problems in the future. So since we have designed a grid that needs to be connected by computers, network engineers are saying that the risk is really high for disastrous cyber attacks, and there has at least been one so far. So moving on to the next slide on how DDoS attacks smart grid infrastructure.
Yeah, so like Jasmine said, the for how DDoS attacks infect and attack smart grid infrastructure. So the way that attackers will be able to access the smart grid is usually through the smart meters attached to the sides of homes and businesses. So a smart meter itself is a computer that monitors the electrical usage of a customer and transmits that data back on the smart grid to the companies that supply the power for, you know, metering purposes. And so the thing about this is that since they're directly connected to the smart grid, they act as a great entry point to getting into the smart grid, because you don't have to worry about keys for logins if you're able to bypass the securities on the smart meter and directly modify them. So the way that the attackers will do this is that they'll hook up their computer to the smart meter and download all the memory from the smart meter onto their own system. And then from there, they'll infect it with a piece of malware that allows them to gain access to the rest of the smart grid to transmit to other devices, such as other people's smart meters, and start forming a bot made out of smart meters. And so then once this bot has come into existence, the whole point of an attack on a smart grid is to essentially slow down or prevent necessary information. And an example of necessary information would be, say the smart grid has a lot of power. So a notification to the generators is pushed to stop producing more power to prevent the smart grid from getting overloaded. Now, if this message was delayed because of a DDoS, then the generators could run longer than they were supposed to and oversaturate the network with power. And that could cause issues such as the destruction of those generators. And then if the generators get destroyed, then that could cause power outages in certain neighborhoods or cities. And this would also create lots of grid instability, because protocols and messages that were supposed to come on, you know, in timely manners either get delayed or not arriving at all. And so that could cause the whole grid to be under a lot of stress. Okay.
5-minute warning.
All right.
Alright.
So regarding the possible solutions we can use here, one of them we can use is a combination of machine learning and deep learning. So we can use them by analyzing the patterns of the network data. However, the accuracy here is going to be the most important factor, especially considering real-time situations. The problem can be tackled by using multiple learning models, which in itself raises the problem of unifying these models. One of the articles we've seen proposed the use of
My bad.
autoencoders, which it basically is a basically unsupervised artificial network that reduces the noise in the data to handle the issue of managing these models. Specifically, the authors of the proposed this model or the integration use a multi-level shallow and deep autoencoders called marginalized stack denoising autodecoders, because they provide a high accuracy and have an improved training time compared to regular autodecoders. Then the features of this hierarchy of autodecoders are unified via a multiple kernel learning algorithm, which weights which ones of these models are more efficient than others and provides a better accurate result. And The results of the experiment show an average of a 93% detection accuracy, outperforming other 6 state-of-art machine learning detection algorithms. Moving on, we also have the cryptography authentication and protocol solutions. Even though they're different, they complement one another. So cryptography in itself is just a strong tool to detect and reject unauthorized message. Sorry, it's a strong tool to detect and reject unauthorized attackers or anyone inside a network that could potentially get inside the network, especially when especially when that network itself has private information. The problem in that is that cryptography in itself could be the target for a DDoS attack. This is due to a verification process, which consumes a significant amount of resources in the router, for example, which if attacker sends a false, bogus, or spoof packet, it could open up the possibility of invasion. In smart grid, it's recommended to use certain mechanisms to cope with that, or more primitive types of cryptography for low power devices. But the problem here is the scalability and the lack of standard. And furthermore, as we have seen, the internet protocols were not designed with security in mind, such as IP and UDP TCP. More secure protocols exist, but they also lack of standard, even compatibility with older versions. There were a few clever solutions. For instance, the sync cookies provide this TCP sync flood, or provide a solution to the TCP sync flood using cryptographic hashing techniques. This area is still under development, and in the next few years, we hope to see better solutions, especially regarding evolvability.
All right, Jasmine.
Yep, going to cloud-based services. So Azure is a Microsoft platform that offers cloud-based services. And in this cloud-based services, you have 2 different protections for DDoS attacks. One is the basic, which is designed to detect malicious traffic and block it while allowing users to connect and prevent additional costs for any auto scaling. And the other one's standard. So the standard will also include, we'll use machine learning to analyze traffic patterns. And the standard one is the one that would cost additional rather than just the basic tier. So now going on to our references or our schedule. So this is our schedule. We plan to meet every Sunday. Go ahead. Go ahead, Harrison.
Yeah, so we plan to meet every Sunday at 6 p.m. and every Thursday at 4 p.m. as well as add in extra times on a weekly basis if we have anything else we need to cover. So this week is week 1. We were doing our preliminary research and forming our proposal presentation. And then for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be researching material and begin writing the literature review. And then the week after that, we're hopefully going to be finishing writing the literature review and starting to make the final presentation, where in week 5, we'll be finalizing the presentation and presenting and submitting our finished literature review. For the paper itself, how we're going to break it down is similarly to how we've broken down our presentation, where I will be explaining what a DDoS is and doing the risk analysis of the DDoS on the smart grid. Luigi will be providing the solution based on machine learning and on cryptography and protocols. And then Jasmine will be presenting or writing about what the smart grid is and explaining the solution via Azure Cloud Services. All right. And then here's our references. With that, I think we can open the floor to questions.
I was a little bit curious about the smart metering. You made it sound as if it's the most vulnerable part of the system. Is that right?
So basically the way the smart grid is set up is that the grid is mostly actually sort of like its own little internet. So it's not actually connected to the main internet directly. However, there are nodes that go between the two, but they're surfaced mainly for the people working on the smart grid to communicate from the computers at the plants and such. So basically the main way that you're able to get into the network for the smart grid is through devices that are already connected to it. So you could connect to if you went to the power plant, you could probably get in through a device like the generators or the computers are regulating them and those such things. But most people don't have access to get on site for a power plant. So the easiest way for most attackers is just to use the smart meter at their home or at their business they work at. And so is it the most vulnerable? I would say probably not any more than any of the other devices on the network. However, it's the easiest one to access to modify. So that's why it's the most vulnerable, I guess, in that regard. Yeah, so any other questions?
Kind of have one more question if nobody minds.
Go ahead.
Sorry. It's just that Jasmine, you mentioned that there was one cyber attack on the smart grid on record, right? Where did you find that? I was trying to find something similar, but I'm curious where you found it and if I
Just-
understood that correctly.
Yeah, through one of my peer reviews that I read, if we go back to the reference.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I believe it's the third bullet point up, survey of DOS attacks and solutions. I believe it may be that one from going down to up, the third one.
I really appreciate it. I'm sorry, I'm just being an Uber nerd right now. I kind of want to read up more on that. So thank you.
Yeah, of
Appreciate
course.
it.
If anything after class, I'll look in more and see exactly which one I pulled it from.
You're too kind. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Edwin.
Were there anybody else that had a question? No? Okay. Then I
Okay,
guess
so-
that's us done.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys. So our last group is who hasn't presented yet. It fell off. Let me see. Aquabots.
Yep. I can share the screen.
Can everyone see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Go ahead, Derek or Darren or
All
Eric.
right. Yeah, so our project is based on robotics and deep sea applications. So again.
Pretty much. So in our introduction, we're mostly on different types of autonomous underwater vehicles and just all of their different applications in both civilian and military fields, and just based on the exact differences in between the uses and between the different types of autonomous underwater vehicles. So. Yeah.
All right. So then we have, what are the benefits of robotics? So it offers possibilities not achievable by humans alone, which can involve interaction in harsh environments such as space exploration, or in our case, what we're researching is deep sea operation. And it's able to perform complex actions without fatigue, which can reduce human error in such as like medical operation where they need to do very specific types of operation. And they can be deployed in place of humans for activities considered dangerous, such as extremely hot or cold environments, or explosive atmospheres found at oil and gas sites. They're able to operate at high speed along with precision, and can be integrated with a multitude of sensors such as thermal and video cameras to gain more information about deep sea. So here we have different types of underwater robots. So the first one that we have is an unmanned underwater vehicle. It's called a UUV. It is designed to travel in a single direction, and they're highly efficient at mapping large areas of seafloor. Then another type is a remotely operated vehicle and called an ROV. So it's designed for movement in all directions, and they're usually tethered. So they're powered externally off-site and controlled to a remote control. And then the third type we have is an autonomous underwater vehicle called an AUV.
I'm sorry for the
designed to-
interruption. Hi, Eric, can you please mute when you're not speaking?
Yeah.
We have a lot of background noise. Okay, there we go. Thank you, Darren.
Yeah, so again, so we have an AUV, which is autonomous. They're designed to maneuver themselves. They're completely untethered, so they work on their own, and they come in many different sizes and depth ratings. And then, so here are some real applications of each type. So the first type we have is a UUV, and it's called the knife fish. And this job is to detect and avoid and identify mine threats, which reduce risk to personnel by operating in minefields as an off-board sensor, while the whole ship stays outside the boundary. And then the second type of vehicle is the ROV, which is the Oceanary Magnum, which is very useful in the oil and gas industry. So it's able to control valves and hydraulic functions underneath in the water. And then we have the third type, which is the autonomous one, is the Remus. And this one was actually useful back in 2011 because it was able to find a crashed missing aircraft black box deep in the water. So
this is one of the like consumer uses. This was on Amazon. I looked at a bunch of them, and during our project, I'll be going more in depth with just how it's evolved over time and what we're using mostly in this day and age. And this one's just, it's got a camera on it and a claw, used mostly for like diving rigs and like people that dive for a living. It's got a very high depth rating, and it's able to take photographs in 4K as well, and just help with exploring ships and different things that have crashed or have sunk in the ocean, and just mostly used by civilians and commercial like people. There, next one. Perfect. And then a lot of our project is probably going to be focused on the military uses, mostly because they've put hundreds of millions of dollars into the creation of the ROV, AOV, all of these different autonomous type submarines and underwater drones, as well as just different applications within the military that wouldn't be used in a civilian setting. But the one that you see on the screen right now is one of the biggest underwater unmanned drones that is used autonomously and can also be remotely accessed. And it helps with just warfare and also just making sure that instead of wasting human life, we're using robotics, stuff like that.
Right, and these are our references. And that is it for our presentation.
Anybody going to Indianapolis?
Awesome. Thank you guys. Very cool stuff. Does anyone have any questions for Darren and Eric?
I have one.
Okay,
So-
go ahead.
Ready.
So you mentioned these remote control submarines, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder how can they be controlled on underwater? Like of course, I'm kind of biased to think about like a Wi-Fi connection, right? Imagine Wi-Fi underwater; it's not gonna work that much. So I wonder how can two places communicate when one of them is submerged in deep seas?
Oh, so yeah, that's why they're considered tethered. If you remotely control them, is because you have to have you have to externally control it from above, which would be above ground, and you have a long cable or wire that powers it, and also you can control remotely. But if you're running them autonomously, they're all going to be programmed within themselves, and they're going to have their own power source and everything. So that's how they work there.
All right, thank you.
I had a question in line with that. You're talking about having them be autonomous. Does that mean that there's no point of contact or telemetry until the what's it called? Until the mission's completed, or is that just like?
Well, they're going to have
Yeah.
on board like sensors and whatnot, so they will have to use the sensors on board in order to work by itself. But yeah, outside of that, you won't really have like too much control. It's meant to be like you know what you want to do with it. You send it out, it would attempt to do what it needs to do. And so like in most cases, they would need to, for like an example we said was the oil and the gas stuff. Sometimes they need to control like valves, or they need to close valves, turn open valves, or they need to pick up something. They will already know how to get to that point per se. You know, it's not unknown at that point for them yet.
Yeah. Also, like we also talked about them trying to like map the sea floor. What they do with those is they just put them in the water and send them straight, and it maps hundreds of miles, and then they pick it up on the other side with they have no connection to the actual, except maybe like a GPS location of the actual drone.
Thank you.
I have one question. In your guys' research, was there any mention of weird creatures found using these robots?
In my research, it tends to see that all of the like new animals that they've found in the recent couple of years is just autonomous drones going deep enough to see these animals, because humans can't take the pressure of going that low into the ocean. So yeah.
Awesome. The
I had a question as well. Once the Orca sub finds mines or anything else, how does it differentiate between just like natural objects, and how is it supposed to do anything with that data? Is it on a search and destroy mission, or is it just a scouting kind of a rig? So the Orca itself is not fully autonomous. It has autonomous modes as well, but it's more of like an aerial drone, but for underwater. So they are still controlled by military personnel, and they're still, whenever they find whatever they're looking for, they have micro drones within the actual Orca that can go out and like blow it up from a safe distance and stuff like that. But a lot of the information on the actual orca, like the schematics and stuff, are classified because I couldn't find them. Cool, thanks.
Awesome. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.